Hi, everybody. It's Paul Mack again for another episode of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in my mammoth live stream event trying to do. Anyhow, I'm glad to see that there's nobody here again. Makes my job easier. But it doesn't really matter if you want to dip in. Please do. You can catch up with the recorded version of this, which will be on the channel pretty much as soon as this finishes. Please, if you enjoy it, please leave a like, maybe subscribe, because it's for a fabulous charity, Mind, the mental health charity, and an awful lot of people will get the benefits of anything that you care to donate. The button is down there in the description, I think, the link. So if you get the chance, pop along to the Just Giving page and donate whatever you can afford. It doesn't have to be much, but it will help an awful lot of people with mental health problems, like me. So without further ado, I will crack on. We were up to the point where they've created the supercomputer Deep Thought to calculate the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. So we shall carry on from where I left off last week. I'll just pop my usual thing over the camera because this is an audio thing. You don't want to be looking at my ugly face while I'm doing it. So there we go. And oops, table almost fell over then. We shall begin. I can find my glasses. You see, man. Oh, they were on the floor all along. So. So their names were Lunquill and Fook. For a few moments they sat in respectful silence. Then, after exchanging a quiet glance with Fook, Lunquill leaned forward and touched a small black panel. The subtlest of hums indicated that the massive computer was now in total active mode. After a pause, it spoke to them in a voice rich, resonant, and deep. It said, What is this great task for which I, Deep Thought, the second greatest computer in the universe of time and space, have been called into existence? Lunquill and Fook glanced at each other in surprise. Your task, our computer, began Fook. No, wait a minute, this isn't right, said Lunquill, worried. We distinctly designed the computer to be the greatest one ever, and we're not making do with second best. Deep Thought, he addressed the computer. Are you not, as we designed you to be, the greatest, most powerful computer in all time? I describe myself as the second greatest, intoned Thought, and such I am. Another worried look passed between the two programmers. Lunquill cleared his throat. There must be some mistake, he said. Are you not the greatest computer, that the milliard gargantua brain, which can count all the atoms in a star in a millisecond? The milliard gargantua brain, said Deep Thought with unconcealed contempt. A mere abacus. Mention it not. And are you not, said Fook, leaning anxiously forward, a greater analyst than the Googleplex star thinker in the seventh galaxy of light and ingenuity, which can calculate the trajectory of every single dust particle throughout a 5-week Dagdagan beta sand blizzard? A 5-week sand blizzard? Said Deep Thought haughtily. You ask this of me, who have contemplated the very vectors of the atoms in the Big Bang itself? Molest me not with this pocket calculator stuff. The two programmers sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Lunquill leaned forward again. "But are you not," he said, "a more fiendish disputant than the great hyperlobic omnicognate neutron wrangler of Ciceronicus 12, the magic and indefatigable?" "The great hyperlobic omnicognate neutron wrangler," said Deep Thought, thoroughly rolling the R's, "could talk all four legs off an Arcturian mega-donkey. Only I could persuade it to go for a walk afterwards." "Then what," asked Fook, "is the problem?" "Oh, there is no problem," said Deep Thought with magnificent ringing tones. "I am simply the second greatest computer in the universe of space and time." "But the second," insisted Lugwell. "Why do you keep saying the second? You're surely not thinking of the multicorticoid perspicutron Titan Mueller, are you? Or the ponderomatic, or the—" Contemptuous lights flashed across the computer's console. "I spare not a single thought on those cybernetic simpletons," he boomed. "I speak of none but the computer that is to come after me." Fook was losing patience. He pushed his notebook aside and muttered, "I think this is getting needlessly messianic." "You know nothing of future time," pronounced Deep Thought, "and yet in my teeming circuitry I can navigate the infinite delta streams of future probability and see that there must one day come a computer whose merest occupational parameters I am not worthy to calculate, but which it will be my fate eventually to decide." Fook sighed heavily and glanced across at Lunquill. "Here we get on and ask the question," he said. Lunquill motioned him away. "What computer is this of which you speak?" he asked. "I will speak of it no further in this present time," he thought. "Now, ask what else of me you will that I may function. Speak." They shrugged at each other. Fook composed himself. "Oh, Deep Thought computer," he said, "the task we have designed you to perform is this. We want you to tell us," he paused, "the answer." "The answer?" said Deep Thought. "The answer to what?" "Life," urged Fook. "The universe," said Lunquill. "Everything," they said in chorus. Deep Thought paused for a moment's reflection. "Tricky," he said finally. "Well, can you do it?" Again a significant pause. "Yes," said Deep Thought, "I can do it." "Is there an answer?" said Fook with breathless excitement. "A simple answer," added Lunquill. "Yes," said Deep Thought. "Life, the universe, and everything. I'll have to think about it." A sudden commotion destroyed the moment. The door flew open and two angry men wearing the coarse, faded blue robes and belts of the Crux One University burst into the room, thrusting aside the ineffectual flunkies who tried to bar their way. "We demand admission!" shouted the younger of the two men, elbowing a pretty young secretary in the throat. "Come on," shouted the older one. "You can't keep us out." He pushed a junior programmer back through the door. "We demand that you can't keep us out," bawled the younger one, though he was now firmly inside the room and no further attempt was being made to stop him. "Who are you?" said Lunquill, rising angrily from his seat. "What do you want?" I am Magic Thighs," announced the older one. "And I demand that I am Vroomfondle," shouted the younger one. Magic Thighs turned on Broomfondle. "It's all right," he explained angrily. "You don't need to demand that." "All right," bawled Vroomfondle, banging on a nearby desk. "I am Vroomfondle, and that is not a demand, that is a solid fact. What we demand is solid facts." "No, we don't," exclaimed Magic Thighs in irritation. "That is precisely what we don't demand." Scarcely pausing for breath, Vroomfondle shouted, "We don't demand solid facts. What we demand is a total absence of solid facts." I demand that I may or may not be Vroomfondle. But who the devil are you? Exclaimed an outraged Fook. We, said Magic Eyes, are philosophers. Though we may not be, said Vroomfondle, waving a warning finger at the programmers. Yes, we are, insisted Magic Thighs. We are quite definitely here as representatives of the amalgamated union of philosophers, sages, luminaries, and other thinking persons, and we want this machine off, and we want it off now. What's the problem? Said Longquill. I'll tell you what the problem is, mate, said Magic Thighs. Demarcation, that's the problem. We demand, yelled Vroomfondle, that demarcation may or may not be the problem. Yeah, just let the machines get on with the adding up, warned Magic Thighs, and we'll take care of the eternal verities, thank you very much. Yeah, want to check your legal position, you do, mate. Under the law, the quest for ultimate truth is quite clearly the inalienable prerogative of your working thinkers. Any bloody machine goes and actually finds it, and we're straight out of a job, aren't we? I mean, what's the use of us sitting up half the night arguing that there may or may not be a God if this machine only goes and gives us his bleeding phone number the next morning? That's right, shouted Broomford. We demand rigidly defined areas of doubt and uncertainty. Suddenly a stentorian voice boomed in the room. Might I make an observation at this point? Inquired the thought. We'll go on strike, yelled Vroomfondle. That's right, agreed Magic Thighs. You'll have a national philosopher's strike on your hands. The hum level in the room suddenly increased as several ancillary bass driver units mounted and sedately carved and varnished cabinet speakers around the room cut in to give Deep Thought's voice a little more power. All I wanted to say, bellowed the computer, is that my circuits are now irrevocably committed to calculating the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. He paused and satisfied himself that he now had everyone's attention before continuing more quietly. But the program will take me a little while to run. Fook glanced impatiently at his watch. How long? He said. 7.5 million years, said Deep Thought. Longquill and Fook blinked at each other. 7.5 million years, they cried in chorus. Yes, proclaimed Deep Thought. I said I'd have to think about it, didn't I? And it occurs to me that running a program like this is bound to create an enormous amount of popular publicity for the whole area of philosophy in general. Everyone's going to have their own theories about what answer I'm eventually come up with. And who better to capitalize on that media market than you yourself? So long as you can keep disagreeing with each other violently enough and slagging each other off in the popular press, you can keep yourself on the gravy train for life. How does that sound? The two philosophers gave back. Bloody hell, said Magic Thighs. Now that's what I call thinking. Here, Broomfondle, why do we never think of anything like that? Dunno, said Broomfondle in an awed whisper. I think our brains must be too highly trained, Magic Thighs. So saying, they turned on their heels and walked out of the door and into a lifestyle beyond their wildest dreams. Yes, very, very salutary, said Arthur, after Slarty Bartfast had related the salient points of the story to him. But I don't understand what all this has got to do with the earth and mice and things. That is but the first half of the story, man, said the old man. If you would care to discover what happened 7.5 million years later, on the great day of the answer, allow me to invite you to my study where you can experience the event yourself on our sensotape records. That is, unless you would care to take a quick stroll on the surface of New Earth. It's only half completed, I'm afraid. We haven't even finished burying the artificial dinosaur skeletons in the crust yet. Then we have the tertiary and quaternary periods of the Cenozoic era to lay down, and no, thank you, said Arthur. It wouldn't be quite the same. No, said Slarty Bartfast. It won't be. And he turned the air car round and headed back towards the mind-numbing wall. Slarty Bartfast's study was a total mess, like the result of an explosion in a public library. The old man frowned as they stepped in. Terribly unfortunate, he said. A, di- a diode blew on one of the life support computers. When we tried to revive our cleaning staff, we discovered they'd been dead for nearly 30,000 years. Who's going to clear away the bodies? That's what I want to know. Look, why don't you sit yourself down over there and let me plug you in? He gestured Arthur towards a chair which looked as if it had been made out of the ribcage of a Stegosaurus. It was made out of the rib cage of a Stegosaurus, explained the old man, as he pottered about fishing bits of wire out from under puffing piles of paper and drawing instruments. Here, he said, hold these, and passed a couple of stripped wire ends to Arthur. The instant he took hold of them, a bird flew straight through him. He was suspended in midair and totally invisible to himself. Beneath him was a pretty tree-lined city square, and all around it, as far as the eye could see, were white concrete buildings of airy, spacious design, but somewhat the worse for wear. Many were cracked and stained with rain. Today, however, the sun was shining. A fresh breeze danced lightly through the trees, and the odd sensation that all the buildings were quietly humming was probably caused by the fact that the square and all the streets around it were thronged with cheerful, excited people. Somewhere a band was playing. Brightly coloured flags were fluttering in the breeze, and the spirit of carnival was in the air. Arthur felt extraordinarily lonely, stuck up in the air above it, all without so much as a body to his name. But before he had a chance to reflect on this, a voice rang out across the square and called for everyone's attention. A man standing on a brightly dressed dais before the building which clearly dominated the square was addressing the crowd over a tannoy. "Oh, people waiting in the shadow of deep thought," he cried out. "Honoured descendants of Vroom Fondle and Magic Thighs, the greatest and most truly interesting pundits the universe has ever known. The time of waiting is over." Wild cheers broke out amongst the crowd. Flags, streamers, and wolf whistles sailed through the air. The narrower streets looked rather like centipedes rolling over on their backs and frantically waving their legs in the air. 7.5 million years our race has waited for this great and hopefully enlightening day, cried the cheerleader. The day of the answer. Hurrahs burst from the excited crowd. Never again, cried the man. Never again will we wake up in the morning and think, who am I? What is my purpose in life? Does it really, cosmically speaking, matter if I don't get up and go to work? For today we will finally learn once and for all the plain and simple answer to all these nagging little problems of life, the universe, and everything. As the crowd erupted once again, Arthur found himself gliding through the air and down towards one of the large, stately windows on the first floor of the building behind the dais from which the speaker was addressing the crowd. He experienced a moment's panic as he sailed straight through towards the window, which passed within a second or so later he found he'd gone right through the solid glass without apparently touching it. No one in the room remarked on his peculiar arrival, which is hardly surprising, as he wasn't there. He began to realize that the whole experience was merely a recorded projection, which knocked six-track 70mm into cocked hat. The room was much as Slarty Bartfast had described it. In 7.5 million years, it had been well looked after and cleaned regularly every century or so. The ultra-mahogany desk was worn at the edges. The carpet's a little faded now. The large computer terminal sat in sparkling glory on the desk's leather top, as bright as if it had been constructed yesterday. Two severely dressed men sat respectfully before the terminal and waited. "The time is nearly upon us," said one, and Arthur was surprised to see a word suddenly materialize in thin air just by the man's neck. The word was "Loonqual," and it flashed a couple of times and then disappeared again. Before Arthur was able to assimilate this, the other man spoke, and the word "futching" appeared by his neck. 75,000 generations ago, our ancestors set this program in motion, the second man said. And in all that time, we'll be the first to hear the computer speak. An awesome prospect for tongue, agreed the first man, and Arthur suddenly realized he was watching a recording with subtitles. We are the ones who'll hear Fuching, the answer to the great question of life, the universe, and everything. Shush, said Luncore with a slight gesture. I think Deep Throat is preparing to speak. I'm forgetting what voices I'm doing for these. Silly bugger. There was a moment's expectant pause whilst panels slowly came to life on the front of the console. Lights flashed on and off experimentally and settled down into a business-like pattern. The soft, low hum came from the communication channel. "Good morning," said Deep Thought at last. Good morning, oh Deep Thought," said Lindquall nervously. "Do you have that is an answer for you?" interrupted Deep Thought majestically. "Yes, I have." The two men shivered with expectancy. Their waiting had not been in vain. "There really is one," breathed Fouching. Fouching. I think this is a different copy of the book. Sorry, but I'm just breaking into thinking. I think an American copy of the book that I'm reading. I'm reading it off a Kindle because I'm sure that those names were different in English edition. Anyway, there really is one, confirmed Deep Thought. To everything, to the great question of life, the universe, and everything. Yes, both of the men had been trained for this moment. Their lives had been a preparation for it. They had been selected at birth as those who would witness the answer, but even so they found themselves gasping and squirming like excited children. And you're ready to get us, urged Lindquall. I am. No, no, said Deep Thought. They both licked their dry lips. Though I don't think, added Deep Thought, that you're going to like it. Oh, it doesn't matter, said Fuchin. We must know it. Now. Now? Inquired Deep Thought. Yes, now. All right, said the computer, and settled into silence again. The two men fidgeted. The tension was unbearable. You're really not going to like it, observed Deep Thought. Tell us. All right, said Deep Thought. The answer to the great question, yes, of life, the universe, and everything, said Deep Thought. Yes, is, said Deep Thought and paused. Yes, is, yes, 42, said Deep Thought, with infinite majesty and calm. It was a long time before anyone spoke. Out of the corner of his eye, Fuching could see the sea of tense, expectant faces down in the square outside. We're going to get lynched, aren't we? He whispered. It was a tough assignment, said Deep Thought mildly. 42, yelled Lindquall. Is that all you got to show for 7.5 million years' work? I checked it very thoroughly, said the computer, and that quite definitely is the answer. I think the problem, to be quite honest with you, is that you've never actually known what the question is. But it was the great question, the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, howled Lindquall. Yes, said Deep Thought, with the air of one who suffers fools gladly. But what actually is it? A slow, stupefied silence crept over the men as they stared at the computer and then at each other. Oh, well, it's just everything. Everything, offered Fuchs weakly. Exactly, said Deep Thought. So once you do know what the question actually is, you'll know what the answer means. Oh, terrific, muttered Fuchs, flinging aside his notebook and wiping away a tiny tear. Look, all right, said Lindquall. Can you just please tell us the question? The ultimate question. Yes, of life, the universe, and everything. Yes. Deep Thought pondered this for a moment. Tricky, he said. But can you do it? Cried Lindquall. Deep Thought pondered this for another long moment. Finally, no, he said firmly. Both men collapsed onto their chairs in despair. But I'll tell you who can, said Deep Thought. They both looked up sharply. Who? Tell us. Suddenly Arthur began to feel his apparently non-existent scalp begin to crawl as he found himself moving slowly but inexorably forward towards the console, but it was only a dramatic zoom on the part of whoever had made the recording. "I speak of none other than the computer that has come after me," intoned Deep Thought, his voice regaining its accustomed declamatory tones. "A computer whose merest operational parameters I am not worthy to calculate, and yet I will design it for you. A computer which can calculate the question to the ultimate answer. A computer of such infinite and subtle complexity that organic life itself shall form part of its operational matrix. And you yourselves shall take on new forms and go down into the computer to navigate its 10 million year program. Yes, I shall design this computer for you, and I shall name it also unto you, and it shall be called the Earth." Fooch gaped at Deep Thought. "What a dull name," he said, and great incisions appeared down the length of his body. Runqual, too, suddenly sustained horrific gashes from nowhere. The computer console blotched and cracked, the walls flickered and crumbled, and the room crashed upwards into its own ceiling. Slarty Bartfast was standing in front of Arthur, holding the two wires. "End of the tape," he explained. "Zaphod, wake up!" Uh? Hey, come on, wake up! Just let me stick to what I'm good at, yeah," muttered Zaphod, and rolled away from the voice back to sleep. "Do you want me to kick you?" said Ford. "Would it give you a lot of pleasure?" Oh, sorry. "Yeah, would it give you a lot of pleasure?" Zaphod said blearily. "No, nor me, so what's the point? Stop bugging me." Zaphod curled himself up. "He got a double dose of the gas," said Trillian, looking down at him. "Two windpipes." "And stop talking," said Zaphod. "It's hard enough trying to sleep anyway. What's the matter with the ground? It's all cold and hard." "It's gold," said Ford. With an amazingly balletic movement, Zaphod was standing and scanning the horizon because that was how far the gold ground stretched in every direction, perfectly smooth and solid. It gleamed like— it's impossible to say what it gleamed like because nothing in the universe gleams in quite the same way that a planet of solid gold does. "Who put all that there?" yelped Zaphod, goggle-eyed. "Don't get excited," said Ford. "It's only a catalogue." "Who?" "A catalogue," said Trillian. "An illusion." "How can you say that?" cried Zaphod, falling to his hands and knees and staring at the ground. He poked it and prodded it with his fingernail. It was very heavy and very slightly soft. He could mark it with his fingernail. It was very yellow and very shiny, and when he breathed on it, his breath evaporated off it in that very peculiar and special way that breath evaporates off solid gold. "Trillian and I came round a while ago," said Ford. "We shouted and yelled till somebody came, and then carried on shouting and yelling until they got fed up and put us in their planet catalogue to keep us busy until they were ready to deal with us. This is all censor tape." Bayford stared at him bitterly. "Ah, shit," he said. "You wake me up from my own perfectly good dream to show me somebody else's." He sat down in a huff. "What's that series of valleys over there?" he said. "Hallmark," said Ford. "We had a look." "We didn't wake you earlier," said Trillian. "The last planet was knee-deep in fish." "Fish? Some people like the oddest things." "And before that," said Ford, we had platinum. Bit dull. We thought you'd like to see this one, though." Seas of light glared at them in one solid blaze wherever they looked. "Yeah, very pretty," said Zaphod petulantly. In the sky, a huge green catalogue number appeared. It flickered and changed, and when they looked around again, so did the land. As with one voice, they all went, "Ugh!" The sea was purple. The beach they were on was composed of tiny yellow and green pebbles, presumably terribly precious stones. The mountains in the distance seemed soft and undulating with red peaks. Nearby stood a solid silver beach table with a free mauve parasol and silver tassels. In the sky, a huge sign appeared replacing the catalogue number. It said, "Whatever your tastes, Magrathea can cater for you. We are not proud." And 500 entirely naked women dropped out of the sky on parachutes. In a moment, the scene vanished and left them in a springtime meadow full of cows. "Oh," said Zaphod, "my brains." "You want to talk about it?" said Ford. "Yeah, okay," said Zaphod, and all three sat down and ignored the scenes that came and went around them. Yeah, I figured this, said Zaphod. Whatever happened to my mind, I did it. And I did it in such a way that it wouldn't be detected by the government screening tests. And I wasn't to know anything about it myself. Pretty crazy, right? The other two nodded in agreement. So I reckon what's so secret that I can't let anybody know I know it? Not the galactic government, not even myself. And the answer is, I don't know, obviously. But if you put a few things together and I can begin to guess, when did I decide to run for president? Shortly after the death of President Uden Franks. You remember Uden, Ford? Yeah, said Ford. He was that guy we met when we were kids, the Arcturian captain. He was a gas. He gave us conkers when he could bust your way into his mega freighter. Said you were the most amazing kid he'd ever met. What's all this? Said Trillian. Ancient history, said Ford. When we were kids together on Beetlejuice, the Arcturian mega freighters used to carry most of the big bulky trade between the galactic centre and the outlying regions. The Beetlejuice trading scouts used to find the markets and the Arcturians would supply them. There was a lot of trouble with space pirates before they were wiped out in the Dordelis Wars, and the mega freighters had to be equipped with the most fantastic defense shield known to galactic science. They were real brutes of ships and huge. In orbit around a planet, they would eclipse the sun. One day, young Zaphod here decides to raid one on a tri-jet scooter designed for stratosphere work. A mere kid. I mean, forget it. It was crazier than a mad monkey. I went along for the ride because I got some very safe money on him not doing it and didn't want him coming back with fake evidence. So what happens? We got in his tri-jet, which he had souped up into something totally other, crossed 3 parsecs in a matter of weeks, bust our way into a mega freight, still don't know how, marched onto the bridge waving toy pistols and demanded conkers. A wilder thing I've not known. Lost me a year's pocket money. For what? Conkers. Yeah, the captain was this really amazing guy. Juden Franks, said Seyfried. He gave us food, booze, stuff from really weird parts of the galaxy. Lots of conkers, of course. And we just had the most incredible time. And he teleported us back into the maximum security wing of Beetlejuice State Prison. He was a cool guy. Went on to become president of the galaxy. Zaphod paused. The scene around them was currently plunged into gloom. Dark mists swirled around them, and elephantine shapes lurked indistinctly in the shadows. The air was occasionally rent with the sounds of illusory beings murdering other illusory beings. Presumably, enough people must have liked this sort of thing to make it a paying proposition. Ford, said Zaphod quietly. Yeah? And just before Uden died, he came to see me. What? He never told me. No. What did he say? What did he come to see you about? He told me about the heart of gold. It was his idea that I should steal it. His idea? Yeah, said Zaphod. And the only possible way of stealing it was to be at the launching ceremony. Ford gaped at him in astonishment for a moment and then roared with laughter. Are you telling me, he said, that you set yourself up to become president of the galaxy just to steal that ship? That's it, said Zaphod, a sort of grin that would get most people locked away in a room with soft walls. But why? Said Ford. What's so important about having it? I don't know, said Zaphod. I think if I'd consciously known what it was so important about and what I would need it for, it would have showed up on the brain screening tests and I'd never have passed. I think Uden told me a lot of things that are still locked away. So you think you went and mucked about inside your own brain as a result of Uden talking to you? He was a hell of a talker. Yeah, but Zaphod, old mate, you want to look after yourself, you know? Zaphod shrugged. I mean, don't you have any inkling of the reasons for all of this? Asked Ford. Zaphod thought hard about this, and doubts seemed to cross his mind. No, he said at last. I don't seem to be letting myself into any of my secrets. Still, he added on further reflection, I can understand that. I wouldn't trust myself further than I could spit a rat. A moment later, the last planet in the catalogue vanished from beneath them, and the solid world resolved itself again. They were sitting in a plush waiting room full of glass-topped tables and design awards. A tall Magrathian man was standing in front of them. The mice will see you now, he said. So there you have it, said Slarty Barfast, making a feeble and perfunctory attempt to clear away some of the appalling mess of his study. He picked up a paper from the top of the pile, but then couldn't think of anywhere else to put it, so he put it back on top of the original pile, which promptly fell over Deep thought designed the earth, we built it, and you lived on it. And the Vogons came and destroyed it 5 minutes before the program was completed, added Arthur, not unbitterly. Yes, said the old man, pausing to gaze hopelessly round the room. 10 million years of planning and work gone just like that. 10 million years, Earthman. Can you conceive of that kind of time span? A galactic civilization could grow from a single worm 5 times over in that time. Go on. He paused. Well, that's bureaucracy for you, he added. You know, said Arthur thoughtfully, all this explains a lot of things. All through my life, I've had this strange, unaccountable feeling that something was going on in the world, something big, even sinister, and no one would tell me what it was. No, said the old man, that's just perfectly normal paranoia. Everyone in the universe has that. Everyone? Said Arthur. Well, if everyone has that, perhaps it means something. Perhaps somewhere outside the universe we know. Maybe. Who cares? Said Slarty Bart fast before Arthur got too excited. Perhaps I'm old and tired, he continued, but I always think that the chances of finding out what really is going on are so absurdly remote that the only thing to do is to say, hang the sense of it and just keep yourself occupied. Look at me. I design coastlines. I got an award for Norway. He rummaged around in a pile of debris and pulled out a large perspex block with his name on it and a model of Norway molded into it. Where's the sense in that? He said. None that I've been able to make out. I've been doing fjords all my life. For a fleeting moment they become fashionable and I get a major award. He turned it over in his hands with a shrug and tossed it aside carelessly, but not so carelessly that it didn't land on something soft. In this replacement Earth we're building, they give me Africa to do. And of course, I'm doing it with all fjords again because I happen to like them. And I'm old fashioned enough to think that they give a lovely Baroque feel to a continent. And they tell me it's not equatorial enough. Equatorial! He gave a hollow laugh. What does that matter? Science has achieved some wonderful things, of course, but I'd far rather be happy than right any day. And are you? No, that's where it all falls down, of course. Pity, said Arthur with sympathy. It sounded like quite a good lifestyle otherwise. Somewhere on the wall a small white light flashed. Come, said Slarty Bartfast. You are to meet the mice. Your arrival on this planet has caused considerable excitement. It has already been hailed, so I gather, as the third most improbable event in the history of the universe. What were the first two? Oh, probably just coincidences, said Slarty Barfast carelessly. He opened the door and stood waiting for Arthur to follow. Arthur glanced around himself once more and then down at himself, at the sweaty, dishevelled clothes he'd been lying in the mud on Thursday morning. I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, he muttered to himself. I beg your pardon, said the old man mildly. Oh, nothing, said Arthur. Only joking. It is, of course, well known that careless talk costs lives, but the full scale of the problem is not always appreciated. For instance, the very moment Arthur said, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, a freak wormhole opened up in the fabric of the space-time continuum and carried his words far, far back in time across infinite reaches of space to a distant galaxy where strange and warlike beings were poised on the brink of frightful interstellar battle. The two opposing leaders were meeting for the last time. A dreadful silence fell across the conference table as the commander of the Vlhurgs, resplendent in his black, bejeweled battle shorts, gazed levelly at the Gugrunt leader squatting opposite him in a cloud of green, sweet-smelling steam, and with a million sleek and horribly beweaponed star cruisers poised to unleash electric death at a single word of command, challenged the vile creature to take back what it had said about his mother. The creature stirred in its sickly, broiling vapour, and at that very moment the words, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, drifted across the conference table. Excuse me. Unfortunately, in the Vlhurg tongue, this was the most dreadful insult imaginable, and there was nothing for it but to wage terrible war for centuries. Eventually, of course, after the galaxy had been decimated over a few thousand years, it was realized that the whole thing had been a ghastly mistake. And so the two opposing battle fleets settled their few remaining differences in order to launch a joint attack on our own galaxy, now positively identified as the source of the offending remark. For thousands more years, the mighty ships tore across the empty wastes of space and finally died screaming onto the first planet they came across, which happened to be the Earth, where, due to a terrible miscalculation of scale, the entire battle fleet was accidentally swallowed by the small dog. Those who study the complex interplay of cause and effect in the history of the universe say that this sort of thing is going on all the time, but that we are powerless to prevent it. It's just life, they say. A short air-car trip brought Arthur and the old Magrathian to a doorway. They left the car and went through the door into a waiting room full of glass-topped tables and perspex awards. Almost immediately, a light flashed above the door on the other side of the room, and they entered. "Arthur, you're safe!" a voice cried. "Am I?" said Arthur, rather startled. "Oh, good." The lighting was rather subdued, and it took him a moment or so to see Ford, Trillian, and Zaphod sitting round a large table, beautifully decked out with exotic dishes, strange sweetmeats, and bizarre fruits. They were stuffing their faces. "What happened to you?" demanded Arthur. "Well," said Zaphod, tackling a bowlful of grilled mussel, "our guests here have been guessing us and zapping our minds and being generally weird, and have now just given us a rather nice meal to make it up to us. Here," he said, hoiking out a lump of evil-smelling meat from a bowl. "Have some vegan rhino's cutlet. It's delicious if you happen to like that sort of thing." "Hosts?" said Arthur. "What hosts? I don't see any," a small voice said. "Welcome to lunch, Earth creature." Arthur glanced around and suddenly yelped. "Ah!" he said. "There are mice on the table." There was an awkward silence as everyone looked pointedly at Arthur. He was busy staring at two white mice sitting in what looked like whisky glasses on the table. He heard the silence and glanced around at everyone. "Oh," he said, with sudden realization. "Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't quite prepared for—" "Let me introduce you," said Trillian. "Arthur, this is Benji Mouse." "Hi," said one of the mice. His whiskers stroked what must have been a touch-sensitive panel inside the whisky glass like a fur, and it moved forward slightly. "And this is Frankie Mouse." The other mouse said, "Pleased to meet you," and did likewise. Arthur gaped. "But aren't they—" "Yes," said Trillian. "They're the mice I brought with me from Earth." She looked him in the eye, and Arthur thought he could detect the tiniest resigned shrug. "Could you pass me that bowl of grated Arctura mega donkey?" she said. Slightly Bartfast coughed politely. Excuse me," he said. "Yes, thank you, Slarty Bartfast," said Benjamin sharply. "You may go." "What? Oh, ah, very well," said the old man, slightly taken aback. "I'll just go and get on with some of my fjords then." "Ah, well, in fact, that won't be necessary," said Frankie Mouse. "It looks very much like we won't be needing the new Earth any longer." He swiveled his pink little eyes. Now we've found a native of the planet who was there seconds before it was destroyed." "What?" cried Starty Belfast aghast. "You can't mean that. I've got 1,000 glaciers poised and ready to roll over Africa." "Well, perhaps you can take a quick skiing holiday before you dismantle them," said Frankie. "Skiing holiday!" cried the old man. "Those glaciers are works of art. Elegantly sculptured contours, soaring pinnacles of ice, and deep, majestic ravines. It would be sacrilege to go skiing on high art." "Thank you, Slarty Bartfast," said Benji firmly. "That'll be all." "Yes, sir," said the old man coldly. "Thank you very much. Well, goodbye, Earthman," he said to Arthur. "Hope the lifestyle comes together." With a brief nod to the rest of the room, he turned and walked sadly out of the room. Arthur stared after him, not knowing what to say. "Now," said Benji Mouse, "to business." Ford and Zaphod clinked their glasses together. "To business," they said. "I beg your pardon," said Benji. Ford looked around. "Sorry, I thought you were proposing a toast," he said. The two mice scuttled impatiently around in their glass transports. Finally, they composed themselves, and Benji moved forward to address Arthur. "Now, Earth creature," he said, "the situation we have in effect is this. We have, as you know, been more or less running your planet for the last 10 million years in order to find this wretched thing called the ultimate question." "Why?" said Arthur sharply. "No, we've already thought of that one," said Frankie, interrupting. but it doesn't fit the answer. Why? 42. You say it doesn't work? No, said Arthur. I mean, why have you been doing it? Oh, I see, said Frankie. Well, eventually just how it, I think, to be brutally honest, and this is more or less the point. We're sick to the teeth with the old thing, and the prospect of doing it all over again on account of those written Vogons, quite frankly, gives me the screaming heebie-jeebies. You know what I mean? It was by the merest lucky chance that Benji and I It was by the merest lucky chance that Benji and I finished our particular job and left the planet early for a quick holiday. We've since manipulated our way back to Magnathea by the good offices of your friends. Magnathea is a gateway back to our own dimension, put in Benji. Since when, continued his Murine colleague, we've had an offer of quite enormously fat contract to do the 5D chat show and lecture circuit back in our own dimensional neck of the woods, and we're very much inclined to take it. Yeah, I would, wouldn't you, Ford? Said Clifford promptly. Oh yes, said Ford. Jump at it like a shot. Arthur glanced at them, wondering what all this was leading up to. But we've got to have a product, you see, said Frank. I mean, ideally, we still need the ultimate question in some form or another. Zaphod leaned forward to Arthur. You see, he said, if they're just sitting there in the studio looking very relaxed and, just mentioning that they happen to know the ends of life, the universe, everything, and then eventually have to admit the fact it's 42, the show's probably quite short. No follow-up, you see. We have to have something that sounds good, said Benji. Something that sounds good, exclaimed Arthur. An ultimate question that sounds good from a couple of mice? The mice bristled. Well, I mean, yes, idealism, yes, the dignity of pure research, yes, the pursuit of truth in all its forms. But there comes a point when I'm afraid you begin to suspect that if there's any real truth, it's that the entire multidimensional infinity of the universe is almost certainly being run by a bunch of maniacs. And if it comes to a choice between spending another 10 million years finding that out, and on the other hand, just taking the money and running, then I, for one, could do with the exercise. But, started Arthur hopelessly. Hey, will you get this, Earthman? Interrupted Zephyr. You are a last generation product of the computer matrix, right? And you were there right up to the moment your planet got the finger, yeah? Um, so your brain was an organic part of the penultimate configuration. Oh, so your brain was an organic part of the penultimate configuration of the computer program, said Ford, rather lucidly. Right? Said Zephyr. Well, said Arthur doubtfully. He wasn't aware of having ever felt an organic part of anything. He'd always seen this as one of his problems. In other words, said Benji, steering his curious little vehicle right up to Arthur, there's a good chance that the structure of the question is encoded in the structure of your brains, so we want to buy it off you. What? The question? Said Arthur. Yes, said Ford and Trillian. For lots of money. No, said Frankie. It's the brain we want to buy. What? I thought you said you could just read his brain electronically, protested Ford. Oh, yes, said Frankie, but we'd have to get it out first. It's got to be prepared. Treated, said Benji. Diced. Thank you, shouted Arthur, tipping up the chair and backing away from the table in horror. Well, it can always be replaced, said Benji reasonably, if you think it's important. Yes, an electronic brain, said Frankie. A simple one will suffice. A simple one, wailed Arthur. Yeah, said Clayford with a sudden evil grin. You just have to program it to say what, and I don't understand, and where's the T, and who'd know the difference? What? Cried Arthur, backing away still further. See what I mean? Said Zaphod, and howled with pain because of something that Trillian did at that moment. I'd notice the difference, said Arthur. No, you wouldn't. You'd be programmed not to. Ford made for the door. Look, I'm sorry, mice old lads, he said. I don't think we've got a deal. I rather think we have to have a deal, said the mice in chorus, all the charm vanishing from their piping little voices in an instant. With a tiny whining shriek, their two glass transports lifted themselves off the table and swung through the air towards Arthur, who stumbled further backwards into a blind corner, utterly unable to cope or think of anything. Trillian grabbed him desperately by the arm and tried to drag him towards the door, which Ford and Zaphod were struggling to open. But Arthur was dead weight. He seemed hypnotized by the airborne rodent sweeping towards him. She screamed at him, but he just gaped. With one more yank, Ford and Zaphod got the door open. On the other side of it was a small pack of rather ugly men who they could only assume were the heavy mob of Magrathea. Not only were they ugly themselves, but the medical equipment they carried with them was also far from pretty. They charged. So, Arthur was about to have his head cut open. Trillian was unable to help him, and Ford and Zaphod were about to be set upon by several thugs a great deal heavier and more sharply armed than they were. All in all, it was extremely fortunate that at that moment every alarm on the planet burst into an ear-splitting din. Emergency! Emergency! Blared the klaxons throughout Magnathea. Hostile ship has landed on planet. Armed intruders in Section 8A. Defense stations! Defense stations! The two mice sniffed irritably around the fragments of their glass transports where they lay shattered on the floor. Damnation! Muttered Frankie Mouse. All that fuss over 2 pounds of earthling brain. He scuttled round and about, his pink eyes flashing, his fine white coat bristling with static. The only thing we could do now, said Benji, crouching and stroking his wrist, is to try and fake a question. Invent one. That'll sound plausible. Difficult, said Frankie. He thought. How about what's yellow and dangerous? Benji considered this for a moment. No, no good, he said. Doesn't fit the answer. They sank into silence for a few seconds. All right, said Benji. What do you get if you multiply 6 by 7? No, no, too literal, too factual, said Frankie. Wouldn't sustain the punter's interest. Again they thought. Then Frankie said, Here's a thought. How many roads must a man walk down? Aha, said Benji. Ah, now that does sound promising. He rolled the phrase around a little. Yes, he said, that's excellent. Sounds very significant without actually tying you down to meaning anything at all. How many roads must a man walk down? 42. Excellent, excellent. Old Fox and Frankie, baby, we are made. They performed a scampering dance in their excitement. Near them on the floor lay several rather ugly men who'd been hit about the head with some heavy designer wounds. Half a mile away, 4 figures pounded up a corridor looking for a way out. They emerged into a wide-open plan computer bay. They glanced about wildly. Which way do you reckon, Zaphod? Said Ford. I had a wild guess. I'd say down here, said Zaphod, running off down to the right, between a computer bank and the wall. As the others started after him, he was brought up short by a killer zap energy bolt that crackled through the air inches in front of him and fried a small section of the wall. A voice on a loud hailer said, Okay, people, Brax, hold it right there. We've got you covered. Cops, hissed Zaphod and spun around in the crowd. You want to try a guess at all, Ford? Okay, this way, said Ford. 4 of them ran down a gangway between 2 computer banks. At the end of the gangway appeared a heavily armored and spacesuited figure waving a vicious killer zap gun. We don't want to shoot you, people, Brax, shouted the figure. Suits me fine, shouted the died down a wide gap between the process units. The others swerved in behind him. There are 2 of them, said Trillian. We're cornered. They squeezed themselves down at an angle between a large computer data bank and the wall. They held their breath and waited. Suddenly the air exploded with energy bolts as both the cops opened fire on them simultaneously. Hey! They're shooting at us, said Arthur, crouched in a tight ball. I thought they said they didn't want to do that. Yeah, I thought they said that, agreed Ford. Zaphod stuck the head up for a dangerous moment. Hey, he said, I thought you said you didn't want to shoot us. Look down. They waited. After a moment, a voice replied, It isn't easy being a cop. What did he say? Whispered Ford in astonishment. He said it isn't easy being a cop. Well, surely that's his problem, isn't it? I'd have thought so. Ford shouted out, Hey, listen! I think we've got enough problems of our own, thank you. On our own, having you shooting at us. So if you could avoid laying your problems on us as well, I think we'd all find it easier to cope. Another pause and then a loud hailer again. Now, you see here, guy, said the voice of the loud hailer. You're not dealing with any dumb two-bit trigger-pumping morons with low hairlines, little piggy eyes, and no conversation. We're a couple of intelligent, caring guys that you'd probably quite like if you met us socially. I don't go around gratuitously shooting people and then bragging about it afterwards and see these Space Rangers bars like some cops I could mention. I go around shooting people gratuitously and then I agonize it about it afterwards for hours to my girlfriend. And I write novels, chimed in the other cop. Though I haven't had any of them published yet, so I better warn you, I'm in a mean mood. Ford's eyes popped off. Who are these guys? I don't know, said Sigmund. I think I prefer them when they were shooting. So, are you gonna come quietly? Shouted the cops again. Or are you gonna let us blast you out? Which would you prefer? Shouted Ford. A millisecond later, the air about them started to fry again as bolt after bolt of killers up hurled itself at Peter Pan. The fusillade continued for several seconds at unbearable intensity. When it stopped, there were quite a few seconds of near quietness as the echo died away. You still there? Called one of the cops. Yes, they called back. We didn't enjoy doing that at all, shouted the other. We could tell, shouted Ford. Now listen to this, Beeble and you better listen good. Why? Shouted Bugsy. Well, because, shouted the cop, it's going to be very intelligent and quite interesting and humane. Now, either you all give yourselves up now and let us beat you up a bit, though not very much, of course, because we're firmly opposed to needless violence, or we blow up this entire planet and possibly one or two others we noticed on our way out of here. But that's crazy, cried Trillian. You wouldn't do that. Oh, yes, we would, shouted the cop. Wouldn't we? He asked the other. Oh, yeah, we'd have to, no question, the other one called back. But why? Demanded Trillian. Because there are some things you have to do, even if you are an enlightened liberal cop who knows all about sensitivity and everything. I just don't believe these guys, said Ford, shaking his head. One cop shouted at the other. Shall we shoot them again for a bit? Yeah, why not? They let fly another electric barrage. The heat and noise was quite fantastic. Slowly the computer bank was beginning to disintegrate. The front had almost all melted away, and thick rivulets of molten metal were winding their way back towards where they're squatting. They huddled further back and waited for the end. But the end never came, at least not for them. Quite suddenly the barrage stopped, and the sudden silence afterwards was punctuated by a couple of strangled gurgles and thuds. The four stared at each other. What happened? Said Arthur. They stopped, said Seyfried with a shrug. Why? Dunno. Do you want to go and ask them? No. They waited. Hello? Called out Ford. No answer. That's odd. Perhaps it's a trap. Oh, they haven't the wit. What were those thuds? Dunno. They waited a few more seconds. Right, said Ford. I'm going to have a look. He glanced round at the others. Is no one going to say, no, you can't possibly let me go instead? They all shook their heads. Oh, well, he said and stood up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, after a second or so, nothing continued to happen. Ford peered through the thick smoke that was billowing out of the burning computer. Cautiously, he stepped out into the open. Still, nothing happened. 20 yards away, you could dimly see through the smoke the space-suited figure of one of the cops. He was lying in a crumpled heap on the ground. 20 yards in the other direction lay the second man. No one else was anywhere to be seen. This struck Ford as being extremely odd. Slowly, nervously, he walked towards the first one. The body lay reassuringly still as he approached it, and continued to lie reassuringly still as he reached it and put his foot down on the killer's up gun that still dangled from its limp fingers. He reached down and picked it up, meeting no resistance. The cop was quite clearly dead. A quick examination revealed him to be from Blagulin Kappa. He was a methane-breathing life form dependent on his spacesuit for survival in the thin oxygen atmosphere of Magrathea. The tiny life support system computer on his backpack appeared unexpectedly to have blown up. Ford poked around it in considerable astonishment. These miniature suit computers usually had the full backup of the main computer back on the ship, with which they directly linked through the sub-ether. Such a system was fail-safe in all circumstances other than total feedback malfunction, which was unheard of. He hurried over to the other prone figure and discovered that exactly the same impossible thing had happened to him, presumably simultaneously. He called the others over to look. They came, shared his astonishment, but not his curiosity. Now let's get shut out of this hole, said Seyfried. If whatever I'm supposed to be looking for is here, I don't want it. He grabbed the second killer's gun, blasted a perfectly harmless accounting computer, and rushed out into the corridor, followed by the others. He very nearly blasted hell out of an air car that stood waiting for them a few yards away. The air car was empty, but Arthur recognized it as belonging to Slarty Bartfast. It had a note from him pinned to part of its sparse instrument panel. The note had an arrow drawn on it, pointing at one of the controls. It said, "This is probably the best button to press." The air car rocketed them at speeds in excess of R17 through the steel tunnel that led out into the appalling surface of the planet, which was now in the grip of yet another dreary morning twilight. Ghastly grey lights congealed on the land. R is a velocity measure defined as a reasonable speed of travel that is consistent with health, mental well-being, and not being more than, say, 5 minutes late. It is therefore clearly an almost infinitely variable figure according to circumstance, since the first two factors vary not only with speed taken as an absolute, but also with awareness of the third factor. Unless handled with tranquility, this equation can result in considerable stress, ulcers, and even death. R17 is not a fixed velocity, but it is clearly far too fast. The air car flung itself through the air at R17 and above, deposited next to the heart of gold, which stood starkly on the frozen ground like a beached bone, and then precipitously held itself back in the direction whence they had come, presumably on an important business of its own. Shivering, the four of them stood and looked at the ship. Beside it stood another one. It was the Blagulon Kappa police craft, a bulbous shark-like affair, slate green in colour and smothered with black stenciled letters of varying degrees of size and unfriendliness. The letters informed anyone who cared to read them as to where the ship was from, what section of the police it was assigned to, and where the power feed should be connected. It seemed somehow unnaturally dark and silent, even for a ship whose two-man crew was at the moment lying asphyxiated in a smoke-filled chamber several miles beneath the ground. It's one of those curious things that is impossible to explain or define, but one can sense when a ship is completely dead. Ford could sense it and found most mysterious. The ship and two policemen seemed to have gone so spontaneously dead. In his experience, the universe simply didn't work like that. The other three could sense it too. They could sense the bitter cold even more and hurried back into the heart of gold, suffering from an acute attack of no curiosity. Ford stayed and went to examine the Blagulon ship. As he walked, he nearly tripped over an inert steel figure lying face down in the coal dust. In the cold dust, not cold. "Marvin!" he explained. "What are you doing?" "Don't feel you have to take any notice of me, please," came a muffled drone. "But how are you, Metal Man?" said Ford. "Very depressed." "What's up?" "I don't know," said Marvin. "I've never been there." "Why," said Ford, squatting down beside him and shivering, "are you lying face down in the dust?" "It's a very effective way of being wretched," said Marvin. "Don't pretend you want to talk to me. I know you hate me." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do. Everybody does. It's part of the shape of the universe. I only have to talk to somebody and they begin to hate me. Even robots hate me. If you just ignore me, I expect I shall probably go away." He jacked himself up to his feet and stood resolutely facing the opposite direction. "That ship hated me," he said dejectedly, indicating the police craft. "That ship?" said Ford in sudden excitement. "What happened to it? Do you know?" "It hated me because I talked to it." "You talked to it?" exclaimed Ford. "What do you mean, you talked to it?" "Simple. I got very bored and depressed, so I went and plugged myself into its external computer feed. I talked to the computer at great length and explained my view of the universe to it," said Marvin. "And what happened?" pressed Ford. "It committed suicide," said Marvin, and stalked off back to the Heart of Gold. That night, as the Heart of Gold was busy putting a few light years between itself and the Horsehead Nebula, Zaphod lounged under the small palm tree on the bridge, trying to bang his brain into shape with massive pangalactic gargle blasters. Ford and Trillian sat in a corner discussing life and matters arising from it, and Arthur took to his bed to flip through Ford's copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Since he was going to live in the place, he reasoned, he'd better start finding out something about it. He came across this entry. It said, "The history of every major galactic civilization tends to pass through three distinct and recognizable phases, those of survival, inquiry, and sophistication, otherwise known as the how, why, and where phases. For instance, the first phase is characterized by the question, how can we eat? The second by the question, why do we eat? And the third by the question, where shall we have lunch? He got no further before the ship's intercom buzzed into life. Hey, Earthman, you hungry, kid? Said Zaphod's voice. Well, yes, a little peckish, I suppose. Okay, baby, hold on tight, said Zaphod. We'll take in a quick bite at the restaurant at the end of the universe. And that's that. And it's only 3 minutes past 8, so my Kindle looks as if it's about to die, which is great. Let's see if I've got a lead I can plug into it. No, don't think that's one of them. No. Okay, so that was the end of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's done. All done. And let's go back to the start, if I can. Bear with me, and I shall get there, if I can work it out. I need to try and find a way of going back to this. I'll be with you in just 1 second. Trying to find the home button. Well, my battery's level is low, so it's going to be a short one today. We'll pick up next week with the first chapter of Restaurant at the End of the Universe. If nobody turns up again, I'll just be shouting into the ether. Anyway, that's the end of this episode. Thank you very much for your non-attendance and non-listening. But if you do catch it on the replay, please, please, please visit the Just Giving page, make a donation, leave me a like, maybe subscribe, do all the things that make life feel wonderful. And I will pick this up next week. Take care, sleep well, good night.